to the next Respect Project talk. Today we are going to be talking about veterans then, now, and in the future. And we have an incredible group of people here who are all doing something on behalf of our warriors, our wounded warriors, our veterans and their families. Jacob Schick is a third-generation Marine and is also the founder of 22 Kills. KIMBERLEE Nicole Smith is the founder of the Tenacious Rose Project. She's also a veteran. She's a health educator and a storyteller. SUSIE Dicker is the executive director of Drawn from VALOR. Debbie Lee is an author. She's a public speaker, and she's the CEO of America's Mighty Warriors. And Gary Sinise, who's also an actor, director, producer, philanthropist, and he's the founder of the Gary Sinise Foundation. So without further ado, I just want to thank each of you for being here today and talking about our veterans. Let's start with you, Jacob. I want to get a little bit of an understanding of 22 Kills and how that all came to be.
Yeah, no problem. First and foremost, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Admire everybody on this panel, and especially Mama Lee, close friend of mine. So really, really excited to be a part of this. I'm actually not even the founder. There's a handful of us of 22 Kill that came together. Some majority Marines, couple businessmen, when the study from the VA came out in 2012 stating that on average 22 veterans die by suicide every day. You know, that just wasn't okay with us. All of us had already personally buried close friends who died by suicide. And so that's where the 22 push-up challenge was birthed. And luckily, after tens of thousands of people, The Rock did it, and then it got to be a big deal. And that's just kind of the way things work. But really grateful for that. That harnessed a lot of support for us. And we realized, okay, we really need to start some in-house programming. And once we get our hands on these warriors, we got to keep them on them all the way through the journey of healing. And so that's where it really all started. And we've been drinking water through a fire hose ever since. But we're very grateful to be in this fight. We're very grateful to be a part of it because, you know, for everybody on this call, not only just the veterans, there's a reason that takes these organizations, because nobody is going to take care of us better than us. Right. And I think that's something that's been the case for a long time. And so just honored to play a small part and honored to do what I can in serving my nation without wearing a uniform, because that's a big misnomer. You don't have to wear a uniform to serve the nation.
Well, thank you for actually saying that. And John ONDRASIK, I'm so sorry. There are so many of us today that I didn't introduce you properly. Singer-songwriter and the head of Five for Fighting, and also has an organization, What Kind of World Do We Want? And I think you're right, Jacob. Together, KIMBERLEE and you and I, we were talking about how you don't have to have served to care about each other. And this is a human conversation. It's not just about veterans. It's actually about having a responsibility for each other. And John, you have done some great work in regards to veterans. I wanted you to talk a little bit about that and what you've done, and you brought Gary into this conversation as well. So maybe you can even talk about the Gary Sinise Foundation a little bit.
Sure. Well, first, let me just thank all the veterans on this call for their service and everyone else for their advocacy. And Debbie Lee, it's always a pleasure to see you. Our first and foremost Gold Star mom, we love you. I have no family in the military, no military experience. I actually kind of got into the game in an interesting way. I've always respected the military, and as a songwriter, understand that they provide our freedom of speech in this country, and that, you know, the whole freedom is not free thing is certainly true. And but I had a song during the second Iraq war, and I started getting correspondences from our troops in the field, and they would start telling me how they use music kind of in their daily lives. Some before they go out on missions, some when they come back, some to escape, some to think of home. And they would use music, the same song, in all these different ways. And it was my first introduction in how kind of music could provide, I think, some mental health positive things for our troops, whether they're in theater or not. So I started to correspond with them. And then I noticed that a lot of what we were seeing on TV and the media wasn't reflecting what they were telling me. So I started kind of doing some USO tours and performing, and really got a sense. I went to Gitmo, and I got a sense on the ground of their experience. And at the time, you guys might remember, you know, there was very controversial war, and there was a lot of kind of things coming out from Hollywood that I felt didn't really reflect the reality. Remember Redacted, and you had all this kind of narrative from Hollywood that our troops are these bad guys, and certainly they're not perfect, but I didn't feel it was fair. So I wanted to try to do something to say that, hey, whatever your position in politics, we can always respect our troops. So I put together a CD for the Troops project, where we would get songs from the biggest artists, the biggest hits, put them on a CD, give them to all our troops and our military families. And it didn't start off too good because everyone kept saying no. And then Melissa Etheridge said yes, which was wonderful, because her politics or mine are about 180 degrees, but we agreed that we love the troops, and the dominoes started to fall. So that actually happened, and we gave, you know, the CDs away to the families and military families, and that's how I met Gary. Gary Sinise, our current Bob Hope. And of course, Gary has his Lieutenant Dan band. And we started doing shows, and we were out playing shows for our troops. And again, it was a constant reminder of that hour was an escape from the daily grind. And I'd educate myself, you know, on what Jacob's doing, the reality that, you know, suicides within veterans are, you know, half as more as the regular population, ALS 2 times more, you know, go down the list, all these things. And so I started trying to do some music therapy work. I fell in love with the Gold Star moms and the Gold Star families. And when I went to Gitmo, I realized that our kind of impressions of veterans, especially for people out in the service, are, you know, our World War II veterans. They're 80 years old. They got the hat on. We love them. We hug them. But, you know, at Gitmo, the kids were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And then you meet their families. So it's this huge pool of people that we have to love and support through all these different means. So as I said, you know, I know Gary really wanted to be with us. He may hop on. He's actually in the middle of a call with a general trying to do some stuff for the troops, of course, and his foundation.
Can you tell us a little bit about why he was inspired to create this Gary Sinise Foundation? Do you know offhand?
Well, again, obviously with Lieutenant Dan, you know, he kind of became an icon, and he always kind of had that love for the troops. But like me, he did have some military in his family, but he saw a way that he could use his platform, you know, his Lieutenant Dan band, and give back. And nobody's done it more like Gary, you know, from building houses for triple amputees to raising millions and millions of dollars. And the thing about Gary, and all of you here who know him, you know, he does it all under the radar, and he does it the right way. And he is, you know, to me, our generation's kind of hidden Bob Hope. And I love him for it. And he's done more for our troops than I think anybody could imagine. And he inspires people like me. And so a lot of stuff we do now is to support his foundation and be lieutenants in his army. And so it's kind of in a way nice that he's not here, so we can like brag about him and talk about him. But again, I think everybody kind of takes their inspirations from where they get it. And it's so exciting to see some of the new mental health. You know, we're going to talk about some of the arts. Kimberlee's going to talk about the arts and how they are becoming so important in our PTSD treatment. And I'm sure I'd love to hear Jacob's thoughts on that too, beyond just, you know, pharmaceuticals and therapy, traditional therapy. There's so many exciting things on the horizon that I think are helping our troops.
Yeah, I love it. Let's get into it. So Kimberlee, talking about the arts and, you know, and coming from your narrative of being a veteran, you know, tell us about your work, what you're doing. I know that you're also the founder of the Tenacious Rose Project, if you want to share a little bit about that, but really, you know, collaboratively, and also thanks to SUSIE, there's a lot of love here because thanks to SUSIE, you're here. And so you guys are familiar with each other, but maybe you can share with us what kind of work you've been doing.
Sure. So thanks to SUSIE, I'm here. Thank you, SUSIE. SUSIE and I met in a space that I occupy in helping social entrepreneurs be amazing and impactful and deep in what they do. As an artist and we say creator and the chief people person of the Tenacious Rose Project, what we do is help artists and conscious creators deepen their impact through creating events and creating community, right? Because we know is when you create something, you're kind of in the weeds creating the thing. But we need to be able to deepen our impact by connecting with the other people. So that leads into what I do, where I come from, what I do. I'm a veteran. I served in Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. I signed up 2 weeks before 9/11 as a graduate of a bachelor's degree and about 1.5 years of grown-up life and getting ready to go to grad school. I was like, grown-up life sucks. Like, clearly I could serve in the Army and have a better footing on real life if I joined than going back 2 more years to college. So I did. And then there were planes flying into a building in a city I grew up in. And I was like, OMG, what did I do? But what I decided I needed to go, because what I chose to do was what I set out to do when I left home. I wanted to help people live the best life they could live the way that they wanted to live it. And I had chose to be a mental health specialist in the Army during that season. And I didn't necessarily at 22, didn't really understand what was happening in the war, but I knew that there were going to be people that needed what it is that I want to do. And so I spent 4 years not at home in other countries doing that with young people, because I was old at 23 and I was talking to 18, 19, and sometimes 65 and 45-year-old battle buddies that my job was to be a force multiplier as a person in the health field. And I had to have hard conversations that said, you got to go back. The troops need you. Your battle buddies need to see you. You got to go back when people didn't want to, right? So having that experience and coming out as a person that kind of came in non-traditionally, right? I did college. I didn't go in as an officer. I went in to get a trade. I went in to get a better footing on being grown up. I knew what my career was. And I went back to grad school and I majored in public health, health promotion, disease prevention. And while everybody was focused on HIV at the time and substance abuse, my experience in the military said, but I talked to a lot of people, and if their social emotional well-being is not intact, they're not following any of this other stuff that you have to say. And I talked to young people just a few years older, few years younger than me, and I was like, their coping skills before they even got here wasn't intact. How, and now they're in a war. Right. How are they going to be okay? And now we're exposed to all this stuff. And then we're transitioning out. Like, this is crazy. We need to focus on in the health field, in social emotional well-being, because without that, it's crazy. And as I transitioned out, and Jacob, you probably talk about this, as a veteran transitioning out into civilian world, I'm like, how are y'all maintaining civilians? Because this is crazy. Like, at least we had each other. We didn't have to like each other every day, but that camaraderie is real. And when you come out, it's like, do y'all even care about each other? And we have to deal with this and be separated from each other. We go back to our lives in different spaces. And I was like, this is my work. And so on my journey, and I'm leaving out a lot of stuff, on my journey and dealing with my own, as we like to say, like unseen wounds, I found the stage. I found improv. And the work that I had done as a facilitator, program developer, public health, mental health counselor, the stuff that I was doing in those spaces happens in theater, happens with the director and the actors, happen with the actors and the audience. We do the same thing. And I'm like, are people doing this? Are they putting it together? And no, they weren't, not that I knew of. And on that journey of discovering myself, I also discovered entrepreneurship. And I found out that as an entrepreneur, it doesn't have anything to do with starting a business. It has to do with being a creative problem solver and be able to identify where there's a gap, a need, and opportunity. And for me to come in and solve that problem, and I saw that there was a gap. There's a ton of people in our world that their social emotional well-being is lacking. And the arts is doing it. And public health practitioners can partner with artists in order to bring it. Because even if you don't go to a doctor, you're going to turn on a TV. You're going to turn on a radio. You're going to turn on something and be connected to culture, be connected to artists, and touch people in ways that practitioners in the medical field can't, especially in emotional health. There's a thing, right? There's the stigma. But if you turn on something, you can connect with the stories of the people you're watching through song, through performative storytelling, all that, that moves people closer. And so I went on that journey and studied. I got a second master's, hats off to GI Bill. I had more education. I got a master's in entrepreneurship, venture creation, and business consulting. And on that journey, I met an artist. Her name is Jill Sankey, a dancer, visual artist that for 30 years at that point had been working at the intersection of arts and health. And she had just got an entrepreneurship faculty fellows award. And I was like, I need to know her because I don't know how to do what I see as possible. And she's been doing it. And she asked me to be on her team. And my first gig was working with veterans. First gig was working with veterans and extending what the VA was doing with creative arts therapy, John, hats off, and what it was doing to help trauma exposed veterans really manage and deal with all the things that we're doing. And I came in on the project with the NEA and Creative Forces to extend that into what community arts organizations can do when they're not, when vets and their families are not in the clinical setting, how they can access the benefits of the arts. And it was then that I realized that the theater is what helped me manage a lot of my mental health things that I didn't even know I had. And it gave me a place to be, and I found my people. And so the work that the Tenacious Rose Project does, we do produce and create shows, and but we really connect the experience of people and building community, social cohesion when you're receiving something by using the arts and health together. So it's a lot of things, y'all, but it's some awesome work where you get to show up and be you and create and be of service to others in this way. As Jacob said, I don't have to keep wearing my uniform to continue to be of service.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Thank you for explaining all of that. I mean, as I hear you talk, I think those are the things I need, and yet I've never experienced the trauma of war or being of service in that way. But you're talking about such universal tools, communication, deep communication, deep expression, and what the arts really have been for all of us here, including Jacob, who's an actor, and John, as a performer. I mean, there is a healing aspect to it. In fact, Susie, I'd love for you to share very specifically what you've been working on, because I think Jacob and Debbie may not know about John from VALOR, and it really speaks to what KIMBERLEE and John both are doing, which is bringing the arts to our troops. But it also helps, your help, for at least from our conversation this week, you're also not only helping warriors, but you're helping their families and their children. And we all struggle with intimacy in our lives and our intimate relationships. And a lot of what you're doing is helping to bridge those gaps, between our warriors and their families.
I am. Thank you. John, KIMBERLEE, and Jacob all brought it up really well, actually. I'm also getting a notification that my internet connection is unstable. So I apologize if there's a lag or if you can't hear me. So I apologize in advance for that. So I am the executive director of an award-winning nonprofit organization called Drawn from VALOR. We were founded specifically to address many of the areas that John, KIMBERLEE, and Jacob mentioned, meaning that we were created in order to help the families of veterans in the military population understand trauma that families may have going through, to help the kids and family members understand, oh, my parent, what is PTSD, what is trauma, in a way to transcend the language barriers that their family members may have had in trying to explain to their child or to their spouse or to their loved one, this is what I'm going through, but I don't have the words to explain it to you. But this animation may be able to help you understand. If we can sit down and watch a show together, then maybe after you've seen it, you may be able to understand what I'm going through, and then maybe we can have a conversation. And that's what the nonprofit work at Drawn is. We make animation, digital content, and activity books that families can sit down together and watch to have those conversations, that helps understand, helps people, empower people to be the bosses of their health and to empower them to understand situations that might be confusing or overwhelming, and helps people see light when there might be darkness, and helps people feel less alone. It's the social emotional part of the equation. And we work with experts to help us make those, so we let them know that there are resources available to them. We are the artists, but we go to experts and say, hey, how can we help? And to your point, Elisabeth, when we started working with the veteran population, we understood it was more than just veterans. Soon found out that trauma and PTSD impact more than just the veterans, that population, that it actually, trauma and PTSD actually can impact 50 to 60% of men and women in the United States, and 14 to 43% of kids and teens actually are expected to have trauma in their lives. And of those 14 to 43% of kids, 1 to 6% of them will develop PTSD. So for us, it became, okay, how can we help? What can we do? How do we let these kids and families know you're not alone and there's always room for hope? Okay, we've got you. Here are these resources. So our resources are about their depression, they're about anxiety, things that families go through, but also things that the general population go through, especially now that the entire world has gone through COVID. And
Right.
it amplifies things that people in the military go through when you have to move, when you get deployed, when you get redeployed. We are also here to say, hey, look, we've got you.
I have to say, I mean, to your point, you know, COVID was the great equalizer. You know, we all now have experienced deep trauma, you know, and we've also collectively as a world, we now recognize that our mental health is our greatest asset. You know, it was mental warfare to go through what we went through, and that's not to take away from, you know, being of service, but yes, I can see how some of the work that you're doing at Drawn from Valor could be really helpful for all of us. And I heard what you were saying, that some of the content, you know, deals specifically with depression and anxiety, and there's different characters that represent these different emotions, and how you navigate them through the arts, through animation, you know, from the storytelling perspective of, you know, our armed forces and their families. And you actually have, you know, workbooks and things like that the children can do with their parents to have a deeper understanding of what it's like to have a father or mother that has served. So I just wanted to re-articulate that, because you've kind of gone a little bit in and out.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mama Lee, last but not least, I'm so happy to get to know you a little bit today, and enjoyed very much our conversation when we talked on the phone. But for those that don't know why you created America's Mighty Warriors, can you give a little bit of a background and what the organization is focused on?
You bet. I'm not a veteran like many of you here who served. Thank you so much. Not an actor, not a singer. I am creative, though. I created 3 amazing children. And Mark, my youngest son, was the first Navy SEAL that was killed in Iraq, August 2nd, 2006. And for me, that was obviously, as a parent, the most crushing day of my life. I've been a widow for almost 27 years, so I'd walked through death before, but I can tell you, you know, losing your child is the toughest thing anybody could ever go through. I've read lots on grief and grieving, and they say the toughest grief is the instant death of your child. And I had no choice, the news that was given to me that day. I could have refused to talk to the KEICO officer and not answered the door. I could have stuck my fingers in my ears and gone, la, 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 but that would not have changed the fact that Mark had died. And that young man is one of the main characters portrayed in the movie American Sniper. Great, great movie. It's Chris's story. They did an awesome job letting the civilian world see a glimpse into what our men and women go through in combat, what their families are dealing with back at home, and the importance to support them when they come back home. But the way they portrayed Mark in that movie wasn't his personality, his character, his nothing. And History Channel actually reached out after that. Mark's teammates wanted to make sure people knew who Mark was. So they did a documentary, and there's 8 parts to it called The War Fighter. And the first one they did was the story of Mark Lee and Charlie Platoon. And they did a great job. Obviously, it's his teammates retelling the story. You know, I'm speaking about Mark and who he was. But when I was notified that day, as I said, I had no choice, the news that was given to me, but I did have a choice how I responded.
Right.
And my choice was to put on Mark's boots, pick up his weapon, and stay in the fight for every man and woman who's serving, stay in the fight for every veteran, stay in the fight for every other Gold Star family member who's lost a loved one. And Mark's teammates, we had support there, you know, from when we were notified to the funeral, but then it's kind of like everybody went away. Mark's teammates were my main support then. They were all still deployed in Iraq. And I'm not one to sit around and have a pity party, but I wanted to make sure no Gold Star family member ever had to go through that alone. I wanted to make sure there was another mom to walk alongside a mom, or a widow to, you know, help a widow, or someone they could call and say, hey, I feel like I'm going crazy here. Is this normal? You know, and just someone there that you can look to and say, they survived. They made it. You know, the toughest day of their life, they made it. And I never woke up one day and was like, gee, I think I'll start a foundation. It just happened. I would be in, you know, Washington, D.C. I live in Arizona, so you don't just happen to be in Washington, D.C. And we'd have a Navy SEAL flown in with his, you know, face blown off, and somebody's calling to let me know ahead of time, you know, and see how we could support. And I'm like, well, I'm in Washington, D.C. I can go to the hospital and meet him. And one thing led to another. Mark wrote an absolutely amazing letter about 2.5 weeks before he was killed that literally has impacted millions and millions of lives around the world. And he talks about, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or a meal or a tank of gas? And just as a way to honor Mark, I started doing those things right away for our veterans and for other families if I met them who'd lost a loved one. And pretty soon I started running out of funds and could kind of see that I had a new mission in life. And so I started our foundation, America's Mighty Warriors. And Mark's name, the meaning of the name Mark is mighty warrior. And he definitely lived up to his name. He stood out in the direct line of fire 3 times that day, willingly made the choice to give his life to save his teammates. He could have ducked below the wall. He could have let his, you know, teammates take the majority of the casualty, but he made the choice to stand up by himself and give his life so that they could live. And obviously, as Americans, that comes back down to each one of us. We enjoy, whether we're creative, whatever we do as an entrepreneur, whatever we do, we have those freedoms in America because of the sacrifice of our men and women who give so much for our freedoms. And then we started 9 years ago. We were the first military charity to start providing hyperbaric oxygen therapy for our veterans who are struggling with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury and suicidal thoughts. Unfortunately, my husband committed suicide 27 years ago. So that gives me the ability to relate even more so to these veterans who are struggling. It also, when I'm speaking with them, man, the walls come falling down when they realize, you know, that not only have I lost my son, I get the honor and respect there, but the understanding piece when they know this is what we've walked through. And it has been absolutely amazing in our Helping Heroes Heal program to be able to provide the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, the hormone and vitamin therapy. There's so many things that our veterans are trying out there right now that are just masking the symptoms. They're not healing them. They go to the VA and they're given prescription drugs, and 2/3 of them say it has a side effect that says may cause suicidal tendencies. And we wonder why our suicide rate's so high. So as we've done this, you know, we've also been trying to make the standard of care with the DOD and VA. And I've had calls with 2 of the VA secretaries. And you know, they just keep saying there's not enough research. So 2.5 years ago, we started doing SPECT scans of the brain before and after. And Jake actually has just recently gone through our program, and we're excited to see when he goes back for his follow-up scan and the changes, the healing that takes place. And it's not just the veteran, it's, you know, the spouse, the marriages that are falling apart because of this, the children that they're losing, if they're grandparents, you know, the separation and the grandkids. And this is so important. If we can't get, so many of their injuries are in the frontal lobe of the brain. And if we can't get them healed, then how are they expected to deal with the emotional issues that they're going through? And we also do retreats for our Gold Star families. We're getting ready to bring 75 family members into Dallas-Fort Worth on Memorial Day. We do a retreat every year on Memorial Day in East Texas. We're bringing them in a couple days early to do the Carry the Load event with them as well. But there probably isn't anything I wouldn't do for our men and women and our Gold Star families, our men and women who served in our Gold Star families. I've dedicated my life to making sure that they know they're loved and that they're appreciated, and that I, for one, never take for granted the sacrifices they make for the freedoms we enjoy every day. So it's my honor to do that through our foundation. We also do events across the United States for our Gold Star families, whether it's a dinner. If I'm speaking somewhere, I'll try to orchestrate it ahead of time. We send out special Christmas ornaments, just little things to let them know we don't forget. I'm actually sitting here in the Heroes Hope Home, which is a place where Gold Star families can come stay for free, and we just love and pamper them and let them know we won't forget. We have another one called the Serenity Hope Home down in Florida, so they can choose, you know, which places they go to. But we are blessed. We are so blessed in America. You know, John, I had the privilege of going to Gitmo as well. I've been to Iraq twice. I'm the first Gold Star mom in history to be in the combat zone. Actually went out on patrol with the 1st to the 4th Cav 3 different times while I was over there. Got to visit Camp Mark Lee, which was the base that was named after my son, and, you know, see where he slept and spent his last days. And I love, love, love our military, and I know how bad they're hurting, and so many are struggling with so much. And so we're here to help heal them.
You know, listening to you talk about everything, I mean, seriously, coming from, I think this is like the ultimate like wisdom in life, coming from our own narrative and answering that need, right? You guys are the insiders, and I'm the outsider wondering how I can help, but you're fulfilling what you know is necessary because of what you've been through in your life. And I think that empathy and compassion, that should be all of our North Stars. You know, I don't know what you know. I haven't walked a mile in your shoes. Although listening to you, there's 2 people I have to introduce you to. One is named Scarlett Lewis, whose son was murdered at the Sandy Hook massacre, and she's such a beautiful mom, and she created a movement called the Choose Love movement. And when we're done with this talk, I've got to connect you to, because she comes from where she lives. You know, she answered, you know, that North Star inside of her, like, what does the world need now based on her loss and her needs? And you did it one person at a time, and then it became a movement, and then it became an organization, and it's growing and growing because the need is out there. So my question to you is, what can we do to meet the needs that are not being met for our warriors and their families? Because part of this conversation is, what does the future need to look like? Because I'm also grateful for my American freedom. So I want to really, you know, talk about what we can do in the future to help our veterans and their families, because you guys are doing such great work, but more needs to happen. We see it with all of these different organizations. I mean, Jacob, you were talking about 22 Kills evolving. America's Mighty Warriors keeps evolving, the Gary Sinise Foundation. But, you know, what can we do? How can we go to your organizations? How can we donate and be a part of the movement to take care of our own who create our freedom?
Elisabeth, one of the things that I think we could all start with is the way that I autograph my books. Live your life worthy of their sacrifice. And we can all do that, whether we have finances to help, you know, support. All of us as nonprofits have needs, financial needs. We can't do what we do without those finances. But I think that's the first thing that anybody, and again, no matter what side of the, you know, political aisle you're on, you can do that. You can live your life, you know, honoring them. You can recognize that sacrifice first of all and do that. But yeah, I agree. I'm sure everyone here with each nonprofit says we need that financial support. But we at America's Mighty Warriors rely a lot on volunteers. So we can always use volunteers that have a skill or a talent that they can donate, whether it's a one-time project or whether they do, you know, weekly come into the office and, you know, work 4 hours out of the week. I think those are some things that probably are consistent with all of our nonprofits.
Jacob, what's next for you and the work you're doing?
It's always subject to change, like every 60 seconds. But you know, when I walked into 22 Kill and took the reins there, I mean, it was me and two other guys that had no clue what the hell we were doing. And you know, now we have over 30 employees. Over 25 of those are licensed therapists, several PhDs, multiple program directors because of the traditional and non-traditional therapy, treatment, and training we do. Last year alone, we did over 7,000 therapy sessions. You know, I mean, we're busy. And what COVID showed us is something I already knew because of my past and my history, starting as a child, you know, from being molested and having my family broken apart and all those other things, regardless of the fact I'm a third generation combat Marine. You know, I know people say they care about that, but really, who gives a damn? Because our trauma and our tragedy is what makes us all the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a crap. Race, color, creed, religion, socioeconomic status, where you're from, all irrelevant. That is not going to negate the fact you will be affected by trauma and tragedy at some point in your life. I guarantee you that'll happen. And so my thing is, you know, I went in there as a knuckle dragging grunt and was like, hey, I only know how to go one way, hard and fast. So let's try this. Because, I mean, when I was in the SUNY Triangle in 04, I had a bad day at the office. You know, got severely wounded, and I lived. I didn't plan on that. I planned on living or dying. No gray area. And, you know, surprised everybody to include myself and lived. And, yeah, I have some physical scars. If I walk in shorts and a t-shirt into a room, it's going to be abundantly apparent that I had a pretty rough day at the office somewhere along the line. But look, I mean, Kimberlee's alluded to it, Debbie's alluded to it, you've alluded to it. It's the wounds you can't see that are most debilitating to your well-being. You know, and I remember just a decade ago, I had a couple warriors look at me and go, you know, Jake, you're lucky, man. Like you have a prosthetic leg and you have these scars that people can see. You can't see my scars. And I mean, literally not more than a decade ago, I was like, screw you. Like, do you want these scars? Because I'm about to give them to you. Because I'm pretty sure I remember this was a shitty day at work. I never lost consciousness, never went into shock. And I got blown 30 feet through the top of Humvee and stuck in the landing with my head. It took 42 minutes for the Black Hawk to come get me. So you want to readdress your scar comment? You know, that was the naive me. That was the me that still hadn't been able to forgive myself for everything I've done in order to survive to get to the point at which I am. You know, that was me still holding on to guilt and shame about most things that I had nothing to do with. I had no control over. It took me years to understand the fact that my control stops outside my skin. That's where it stops. We are all masters of thinking we have control of everything around us, and all you're doing is tricking yourself because you don't. And so I learned early on with 22 Kill when we started getting all of this support and all of these funds. And look, we don't want to be a pass-through entity. We want to be able to get our hands on them, keep them all the way through their journey of healing, and develop this tribe, this human tribe, because we're all equally fundamentally flawed. I'm a spiritual being, and I'm unapologetic for it. And I'm going to say what I mean. I'm going to mean what I say, because I left blood and body parts on the battlefield. So I'll say whatever the hell I want. And if that bothers you, it's most likely a you thing, not a me thing. And my thing is that I'm no better than anyone else. I truly believe that in the fight for the greater good, there is no room for self-interest and self-gain. 22 Kill has gotten to where it's gotten because I've surrounded myself by people better than me, and by default, I'm better. That's a fact. The reason that people like me miss places like the Triangle of Death and the SUNY Triangle, straight up, is because it's easier than being a civilian. That's a fact. It's inherently more dangerous. It's 100 times easier. There's not going to be a lot of people that say that because I'm taken away from the warrior bravado, and I don't give a damn because I have nothing to prove to anybody. My thing is, it's easier. That's why we miss it. Camaraderie, that's a fact. But you come back here and you have too many options and choices. You get too confused by societal expectation to adhere to camaraderie. You don't have time for that. You're going to miss Jerry Springer or the Kardashians. You can't do that. My thing is like, look, lean in and love hard. Everybody's going to have an opinion. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Because I believe as human beings, again, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, socioeconomic status, I do not care. I don't care who you vote to, or who you vote for, who you don't vote for, who you pray to, who you don't pray to. I don't care. Like, you're a good person or you suck. There's not a lot of gray area there.
Hard and fast. Exactly.
Yeah. And my thing is, I think that as human beings, as the human tribe, we all have two objectives from the time we're born to the time we die: love and be loved. I think everything in between is filler. Love and be loved. That's
I
it.
was going to say that too, Jacob. Like, I love where you come from, especially as a grown man, that you speak in the way that you are. Because what I tell people, I definitely believe at the end of the day, we are all spiritual beings in this meat suit. What connects us all is that light that is the spirit that we can, that we come here with. And we forget that. At the same time, it doesn't matter what you do for a veteran, because I tell you what, nobody knows I'm a veteran because I'm a person. I'm what they call a closet veteran. I don't go to anything that say a Veterans Day something. I don't go to anything other than the VA because I got to go there, right? But when I'm not there, I'm just a person. It doesn't mean that I wasn't in combat, but I wasn't in combat service in the experience that Jacob did. I've been trying to get service connection for something at the VA that they said, well, you didn't report it when you were in service. I was like, you must not know where we work. Who was I going to report it to? And still walk around with that stuff. Do you know what I mean? So yes, my battle buddies that have experienced terrifying things, hats go off to them, because they did their part so that we could come home as well. We did our part as well. But at the end of the day, like Jacob was saying, and we were saying earlier, all veterans were civilians before. All of them had a life before transitioning out of military. I feel like when we were in, we dreamed of like when we were going to get out, like the day, and then we got out and was like, oh no, this is what y'all doing. But I tell people that work in communities that want to serve veterans and want to extend and they want to give their honor, remember, there's a ton of veterans that you will never realize are veterans that need you too. So think about, how are you treating your neighbor?
That's right.
You don't know whether or not they're a veteran today, or their kid or their uncle or somebody else in their life is growing to be and serve later on. It is about what we do as people to people. And thank you to everybody that has an organization that serves in a nonprofit or community organization, because the VA does what the VA can do. But I can tell you, majority of my battle buddies that I served with, that saw things that I didn't see, are not service connected and are not going to things that need support and need help. And that's why I created what I do, because like I said, everybody has access to entertainment. Everybody has access to the arts. Everybody has access to culture. Everybody has access to that. And it's easier to lean into that and hear somebody else speak their voice. So Miss Debbie, I love what you were saying, because telling your story and creating from your lived experience as an entrepreneur, a social impact entrepreneur, I say, it doesn't have to be a for-profit organization for it to be still an entrepreneurial practice, that the greatest impact ventures that are created from an entrepreneur is from their own lived experience, because other people need to know they're not alone. Because so many times as people, we go through all sorts of things and we think it's just us. We don't know. And there's certain movements like the Me Too campaign. I always talk about, like, somebody had to go first to say this happened to me, for somebody else to say me too, for somebody else to say me too, for somebody, and it goes on. But there's a ton of folks that won't just say, well,
But that, but
Yeah,
that,
it
but
happened the other day.
that's the thing, right? And that's what I love about, really what Jacob said, which is like, I'm going to give you my trauma and I'm going to offer it up to you so that you feel seen and heard, whatever your trauma is. Jacob said, your trauma is not worse than my trauma. My trauma is not worse than your trauma. Like, I'm a traumatized human being, to quote you, Kimberly, in a flesh suit, which I say all the time, being a human being is hard. Dealing with, the lack of respect and care for our veterans is a topic that is specific, but our human experience is also part of this conversation, right? So the Respect Project, no matter what we're talking about, it always comes down to, let's tell the truth on behalf of each other. Let's tell it fast and hard, because we all need somebody who is going to grab our hand and help us through this life experience, right? So there's some
Right.
things we got to figure out. How are we going to help our veterans? But also collectively, how are we going to be there for each other? And to quote you again, Jacob, just say, and to stop fucking like pretending. And let's all start helping each other from a real fucking place of like
Yeah.
love
and-
and respect.
Well,
And
Yeah,
tell
and
the
that's
truth
real
about
quick.
what it takes to be a person. And every topic is up for conversation because, we're all touched by, like you said, trauma and this human experience that we all share in.
Yeah, and just real quick to answer the question about what can people do to help our veterans specifically, but for me, it's like, hey, if you want to help veterans, great. Just help somebody. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to be a vet. Like I volunteered
yep.
to remind everybody, nobody owes me a damn thing. I had a
Right.
bad day at work, period, the end. I volunteered. You know what I'd change about the whole thing? Not a damn thing.
Right.
Volunteer.
True.
So my thing is, if you want to help vets, if you want to help somebody, everybody on this planet harnesses three things of value, some more than others: time, talent, and treasure. If you're not willing to sacrifice some of one of those three things, you don't want to help. We're talking. We have plenty of talkers.
Mhm.
Time, talent, and treasure. Service and sacrifice are synonymous. You cannot do one without the other. That's a prime example of being able to serve your country, this world, for the greater good, and not having to wear a uniform to do it or dodge bullets. So, I mean, there's so many things that we talk about, we get caught up in, and we get so conditioned by society. And, well, we got to put this in this categorical boxes, and that makes me comfortable to talk about it. I'm like, fuck that. Find victory in your vulnerability and refuse to be a hostage to your pride. You're going to get judged no matter what. And guess what? What people think of you is none of your damn business.
Mhm.
Wake up and do you. Everybody else is taken.
Yeah.
Jacob, I need to hang with you, homie. Like you're a real deal.
Yeah, I
I know.
don't have time. I'm living on borrowed time. I don't have time to bullshit. Quickest direction between point A and B, straight line.
Real talk. That's real talk.
I tell you, I was, I've worked with the Wounded Warriors through the Red Cross for a really long time. And I went to BAMC for the Christmas party there. And I've always said to myself, I'm not a dancer. I hate to dance. I've got two left feet, blah, blah, blah. You know who taught me to two-step? Somebody with prosthetic legs and half his head blown off. He said, get up off your ass. And he's like, let me show you how to two-step.
Yep.
And I tell you, that has stayed with me for so long. That sort of philosophy. I have spent time with in at Walter Reed with kids with 115 pins in their leg who have more love of life and more passion for each other and more a sense of community than just about anybody. You guys have seen the edge of the end of the world, and you've come back and you've brought so much love of life that I've been deeply influenced by the warriors that I know. So I think that the way you speak is so inspiring, Jacob. I think everything you're doing, Debbie, everything you're doing, Kimberly. I mean, Susie, I'm excited for Jacob and Debbie and everybody to learn more about Drawn from Valor. You guys are just amazing human beings. And like you said, Jacob, it's not just about helping the veterans. It's just about helping the next person that's next to you. And either you're a good person or you suck. That's
Not a lot of gray area there.
It's not.
a lot of
It's
gray
not.
area. Exactly. I just want to read a little bit from the messages. Nancy said, anyone who helps is a hero. Thank you all for being heroes in your own lives and the lives of others. You're extraordinary and caring for souls. Thank you. Mad love and respect to you all. I don't see a lot of questions here, but I'm so glad that
Susie.
Susie, you took some time to put up America's Mighty Warriors, 22 Kills, the Gary Sinise Foundation, drawn from VALOR. And John, is there a website for the work that you've been doing as well?
Yeah, there's a What Kind of World Do You Want Foundation, if people would like to.
Oh, sorry, John.
Yeah. But
What's your website?
well, it's the What Kind of World Do You Want Foundation. But again, I basically just focus everybody towards Gary's foundation because they're doing so many great things, talking about the future. They are the future for therapy. And the last thing I'd say is, one thing I've loved about this conversation is the word family. I think if we're talking about the future, what we can do for our veterans, I think most people want to help our veterans. But I think what gets lost is the families. And I remember when I first started talking to the troops, they'd say something very strange to me. They'd say, John, it's harder on our families than us. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's probably something Jacob would say, because they are heroes and they're courageous. And they say, we're busy every day. We have things to do and our family's just sit at home. And hopefully that knock that Debbie got doesn't come. So I think the future for taking care of our veterans is not just the soldier. It's the entire family for two reasons. One, the stresses they go through while their loved one is away in theater in harm's way. And two, when the soldier comes home, everybody needs to understand that dynamic. And I don't think that's focused on enough, because if you don't have a healthy family structure that understands, it's going to be much harder for that family to come together and help their loved one that was at war and vice versa. So to me, that's beyond all the therapy stuff, the music therapy, the arts. I think family needs to be synonymous with veteran. And I think that's the future, at least for me.
That's right. Actually, Susie was talking so much about that. Yeah, go ahead. I see you wanting to jump in.
I was going to say, for what it's worth, John, that's what we do a lot of work on is resources and tools for the families. And a lot of the resources on our websites are specifically meant to help families and for kids and families all, to empower them and to support them. And because we agree fully, we know that if family unit does support, everyone doesn't have support, really, then it's really needed, basically. So
well, if you ever need a singer,
completely.
if you ever need a singer for a fundraiser, you got one right here, because you're doing exactly what I think we need. Thank you so much.
And
Awesome.
definitely, I wanted to say too, John, the University of Florida Center for Arts and Medicine, in connection with NEA's Creative Forces, what they're doing in community is so that, the VA doesn't serve the families,
right?
But in community where they live, the work of Creative Forces is extending what the arts experience, creating, not only experiencing, but also creating. Because we know our vets, we can make some stuff. You give us some 550 chord and nothing, we're gonna have a castle. I'm just saying. So to bring that creative experience to the families at home, sometimes the VA is 2 hours away. Family, the kids can't be a part of it. But like I said, people don't know when they walk in. When I walked into the theater and started doing improv classes, they didn't know I was a vet. They didn't know how they impacted my life. They didn't know any of that. You just got to be a good person. But I love that you said it's not just the vet, because it is the family that experiences all of the things too.
And
Yeah.
also, the family during the time that their loved one is serving, when they come home, all of those different iterations of, how the family dynamic is affected. KIMBERLEE, Nicole Smith's website is up as well. What Kind of World Do You Want is here too. Anybody want to add anything before we jump off? I just want to say thank you so much for just coming and being a part of this Respect Talk, and just being awesome human beings who don't suck.
I'm not sorry about that, by the way.
Jacob, I'm going to be quoting that forever now.
No, but John, I was going to say, be careful. I might ask you to play piano before we all get off this call. I see that piano back there.
No, don't you worry. I'm going to be in touch. Because I'm in LA often, because the stuff I dabble in and entertainment with Hollywood, and it just happened to be good friends with Bradley Cooper, so I help stuff. But I look, all of you guys, I just want the viewers to know, just do something for someone and expect nothing in return, and tell me what that does for
Agreed.
yourself.
Yep.
You know, like it doesn't have to be like, yeah, we got to treat the family unit. Absolutely. You know, I know with me, when a guy like me comes home and my personality and the way I am, we leave a big wake in our path.
You want a song to take us out?
Yes, I do. And by the way,
Boom.
somebody is saying here,
Yes, please.
check out the Vital Warrior Project as well. Somebody said so, and everybody wants music. Yes, John. Yes, yes.
Right on.
We want our hearts and souls to be healed.
Well, again, why don't we start? I mentioned in the beginning that I had a song that kind of introduced me to this world that I was getting calls on. So I'll play that song. And again, thanks all you who do an amazing work. Liz, the Respect Project is so important.
Thanks.
You know,
Thanks, Liz.
taking the lead on that, it's so crucial. And I'm going to say apologies for Gary because he was stuck on that call, but he was here in spirit, because frankly, without him, I wouldn't be here, and many of us too wouldn't have this passion. So, so the song was called Superman. So this is the song. I can't stand to fly. I'm not that naive. I'm just out to find a better part of me. I'm more than a bird, more than a plane, than some pretty face beside a train. It's not easy to be. Wish that I could cry, fall apart my knees, find a way to lie, like a home I'll never see. May sound absurd, don't believe, even heroes have the right to bleed. I may be disturbed, won't you concede? Even heroes have the right to dream. It's not easy to be. But ran away from me. Now it's alright. If our sleep sounds tonight, I'm not crazy or anything. I can't stand to fly. I'm not that naive. Man, we're meant to ride. Clouds beat through the knees. I'm the only man in a funny red sheet. Taken from kryptonite on this one-way street. Only a man, funny red sheet. No special things inside me, inside of me, inside of me. It's not easy to
Oh my God, I love you guys. Thank you so much. I mean, John, that was the perfect way to end this Respect Talk. I love you. Susie, Debbie, Kimberly, Jacob, thank you. Peter Lenkoff is listening. Also, Gary Sinise is not here, but his spirit is here. And I will see you guys on the next Respect Talk.
Thank you. Bye.